There's one concept in business that separates those who succeed from those who fail. One graph, one mathematical equation that if you understand will likely be the biggest determiner of your success. And if you don't understand will likely be the reason that you find yourself jumping around from business model to business model, never truly getting good at any of them and never really making any real money online. Now, the graph that I want to talk about in today's video is actually the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, if you've never seen this graph before, I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen. And I also want to talk about my own unique perspective of this graph. So initially when this graph was created, I believe that they plotted confidence on the y-axis, and I think it is the amount you know about the particular subject on the x-axis. And I do think that's very powerful, and we'll talk about that viewpoint in just a second. But the way that I like to put this graph in perspective when I'm talking about my business or any online business for that matter, is plotting optimism on the y-axis and how long you've actually been doing the thing on the x-axis. And both graphs are very important in both interpretations. But what happens when you start a new business is you usually are naively optimistic. You usually feel like just after learning about it from watching a couple short videos that you can go and take your knowledge and start building a $10,000 a month business in a week or in a month or very, very, very quickly. And that's just not true. It's going to take you some time. It's going to take you some sweat equity to actually start building a real business online. You're not going to get there in a single day or a single week. I certainly didn't. It actually took me a couple months or a few months even to make my first sale. But I understood this graph, and it was actually what pushed me through, because when you start a new business, you're very optimistic at first that you can do this thing and that it's going to be very easy. And what you'll realize, and this is true for anything that's worth doing in life, is that things that are worth doing typically aren't as easy as they're made out to be. Now, I do want to preface this by saying that building an AI lead generation agency like myself is actually one of the easiest and most beginner-friendly business models out there, bar none. It's much, much easier than trying to become a lawyer and start your own practice or becoming a doctor, or even starting your own home service-based business, although those are a little bit easier, in my opinion, than becoming a doctor or a lawyer as well. But you can start my type of business just from your home with a laptop, Wi-Fi, and a camera. But at the end of the day, you're still going to realize after doing it for a little while that this business model is not just show up and get paid. There is some real work that goes into building an online business. And what happens is you go from being naively optimistic to having your optimism actually go down as you put more time into whatever it is that you're trying to do. And you end up in what is called the valley of despair. And this is the part of the graph where your optimism is at an all-time low because you realize how hard this thing is to actually do, but you're actually putting in some time, and you've already put in some time into getting better at this particular business. And this is where most people give up. This is where most people mess up, is they will switch to a different vehicle, to a different business model that they feel like is superior, that they feel like is going to be easier. It's the woman in the red dress. It's the shiny object syndrome, if you've ever heard of it said like that. And that is you going and trying to find a different vehicle that's easier. But what you'll find out is that all of the business models have that same problem, is that you're going to start off naively optimistic, and very quickly you're going to realize that this is harder than you initially thought. And that's okay. And where the real power comes from is not quitting when you get to that valley of despair. And understanding this graph and understanding that if you give yourself enough time, you will come out the other side and you will then be very optimistic again because of the same reasons that you got into the business model to begin with. You can make a lot of money. You can make $1 million a year working 30 hours a week from home. This is possible doing what I do or doing what others have done. And if you just continue pressing forward and you do not quit, you can get there. And for me, I understood this very early on in my business, and it's been one of the things that I attribute most to my success. And the way that I like to frame this in my head is I understood when I watched videos online of other people teaching this, that there were people out there younger than me, maybe 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, that were making more money than doctors and lawyers, or that were making $1 million a year running this business model. And I knew that if I just did not give up, if I just continued to get better each and every day, that it was almost unreasonable that I wouldn't eventually get there. I consider myself a smart person, so I thought to myself, they're not smarter than me, they're not better than me. If I just don't quit, I will get there eventually. And even if you don't feel like you're a smart person, just don't quit and eventually you will get there. And what really drove this point home for me was thinking about some other career paths. Take a doctor, for example. They will have to go to school for 4 years to get their bachelor's degree. And then they have to go to school again for another 4 years after that to become a doctor. And then if they want to become something like a surgeon, maybe they have to do 2 more years of residency to finally start making some real money. And if you think about that, that's 10 years of their life that they're committing to this thing so they can eventually make a lot of money in the end. And maybe they're doing it also because they care about people and they want to be a doctor because of moral reasons and ethics and things like that. That's all great as well. But looking at it purely from a financial standpoint, they are putting in 10 years of their life and they're going into debt at the same time, where they're going into $300,000 worth of debt, sometimes even more, to become a doctor. And I've always thought to myself, well, there are people out there that are younger than me that are making a ton of money doing what I do, and if I just don't quit, I will eventually get there. And even if it takes me 10 years, then at least I get to make money along the way, right? Whereas if you look at a doctor when they're going to school, then they actually have to be spending money to be learning about this thing. And even when they get into residency, they're not really making very much money. Whereas if you look at something like what I'm doing and you look at how much money I make each month, it's almost like you're looking at the NASDAQ or the S&P 500, right? There are dips as I'm going up. It's not like I only go up. But at the end of the day, I'm making more money than I was 6 months ago. And I was making more money then than 6 months prior to that. And so I get to make more and more money on my way to $1 million a year than somebody who is doing something like a doctor where they have to be putting in all of this work for the final payout at the end. And you just have to ask yourself what you're willing to commit. And is this something that if you can get that payout at the end, is it worth everything beforehand? There are people who work on Wall Street who, when they start off, maybe they're making 200 grand a year, but they're having to put in 80-hour work weeks. They're never going home. They're going in to work when the sun isn't up yet. They're leaving work when the sun's already down. They're not even seeing the light of day. And they're doing all of this for what they believe is the payout at the end. They can go from making 200 grand a year when they start to making millions of dollars a year later in their career. And I don't really think that's worth it for me. I wouldn't want to give up all my entire day and my entire week for a job. And I don't have to in the agency that I run. But the point being is that people will give up a lot to be able to live the life they want and to make the money that they want later in life. And if you're doing something like an AI lead generation agency or a service-based business, maybe you're building websites, it doesn't really matter. There are people out there that are making $1 million a year from home with their own company. And you could be that person too if you just do not quit. And so that is kind of the driving principle I wanted to bring home in this video, is that if you can just expand your time horizons and understand that you're going through the valley of despair, it will help you to not give up and to keep pushing forward and to get better at what you do. And I talked about this graph with, optimism plotted on the y-axis and the time you've spent doing things on the x-axis. But I believe initially it's about confidence and the amount you actually know about something. And this graph is just so true for anything worth doing. And it's applicable for so many different fields, whether you're going to school to be a mathematician and you're, going into your freshman year of college doing calculus 2, and you might think that you know everything about math, and you'll start to learn as you start doing math that you really don't know that much and that you have a long way to go, right? And that's where the confidence level spikes downward. It's the same thing if you were trying to do jujitsu and you come into class and then after a month or two, you start feeling like, oh, I actually kind of know jujitsu now. I'm starting to get pretty good at it. Really quickly, early on after that, you're going to start realizing just how much you don't know and how many steps you still have to go forward before you can actually become an expert. And so I'm not even an expert at what I do now, but I'm exiting the valley of despair. I'm making good money now, making doctor money, lawyer money now. And it feels good. And I understand still that I'm not a complete expert and that I still have lots to learn. But the cool thing is you can make 40 grand a month without being an expert. You can make 80 grand a month without being an expert. That's $1 million a year, practically. I think it's $960,000 a year without being a complete expert at what you do. You just have to become an expert at a couple things within your business model, right? And I've talked to you before about how marketing is the hardest thing to do. If you can become an expert at just one particular subset of your marketing, because you can cold DM your clients on Instagram, you can cold call them, you can cold email them, you could run your own paid ads. Heck, if you run paid ads, there's 8 different ways to run paid ads. You can run it to a VSL, you can run it to a Facebook lead form, you can run it to a landing page. You can do a lot of different things with paid ads, but you really just need to crack one of these to be able to make 40 grand a month or 80 grand a month, or even more than that. So you don't have to become an expert at every single thing in your business, but you will get better over time. So I hope this video helped to give you some motivation to push through that valley of despair if you're already in it, and to have some idea that that is coming if you're just now starting to embark on your journey of being an entrepreneur and building your own business, is that graph is coming. And if you know it beforehand, You will recognize when you're in that valley of despair, and you will know to tell yourself, hey, this is normal, this is natural. This is what happens when you're doing something that is worth doing. And if you just push through it, if you just keep going, eventually you will exit that and you will get to become an expert in what you do, and you will get to start making real money, and everything will be worth it in the end. So I hope that gave you some motivation, whether or not you're just starting or you've been doing the business for a while, and I will see you in the next video.